What if owning a home in Australia is no longer a safety net, but the biggest financial risk of your life? Right now, millions of Australians are one shock away from losing the roof over their heads. Mortgage stress is climbing, rents are surging, and housing experts warn that 2026 could mark a breaking point. Studies already show record levels of housing anxiety, with families spending more than ever just to stay housed. Behind the headlines, Australia's housing system is cracking under pressure. Rising interest rates, shrinking rental supply, stalled construction, and rapid population growth are colliding at the same time. Researchers say when multiple housing pressures hit together, the fallout isn't gradual, it's sudden. People don't slowly adjust, they're forced out. Quietly, households are draining savings, skipping essentials, and living with constant fear of displacement. In this video, we revealed 10 powerful reasons why Australia's housing system is breaking and why millions could lose their homes if nothing changes. Stay until the end, because the final reasons explain why this crisis may hit everyday Australians much harder than anyone expects.
Number 1. Mortgage repayment shock. Suddenly, thousands of Australian households are discovering that their mortgage is no longer predictable or manageable. As fixed-rate loans roll off and variable rates remain high, monthly repayments are jumping by hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Housing finance studies show that when interest costs rise faster than wages, mortgage stress spikes sharply. Families who budgeted carefully under previous rates are now finding that even basic repayments consume most of their income, leaving little room for food, utilities, or emergencies. At the same time, research into household debt reveals a dangerous pattern. Many homeowners enter the market during years of low rates, assuming conditions would remain stable. Now, refinancing options are tighter, lending rules are stricter, and property values in some areas are no longer rising fast enough to provide an exit. This creates what economists call a repayment trap, where selling means a loss, but staying means ongoing stress. Studies link prolonged mortgage stress to anxiety, sleep problems, and delayed health care, especially among families with children. Ultimately, the mortgage repayment shock doesn't just affect individual homeowners, it ripples through the entire housing system. When people are forced to sell under pressure, prices can fall locally, increasing risk for others nearby. Experts advise early action, reviewing loan terms, speaking to lenders before missing payments, and building even small cash buffers where possible. Waiting until repayments become unmanageable often removes options. A mortgage was once seen as a path to security, but for many Australians, it is quickly becoming the source of constant fear and instability. If mortgage stress is affecting you or someone you know, share your experience in the comments so others feel less alone. Please support our work by subscribing. It's just one click and it helps us keep making these videos.
Number 2. Rental market breakdown. Across Australia, the rental market has moved from competitive to crisis level almost overnight. Vacancy rates in many cities are hovering near record lows, while rents continue to rise at a pace wages simply cannot match. Housing studies show that when supply tightens this severely, renters lose negotiating power completely. Lease renewals now come with sharp increases, shorter terms, or sudden notices to vacate, forcing families into a constant cycle of uncertainty and stress. Meanwhile, research into rental insecurity reveals how quickly pressure builds. Renters are spending a larger share of their income just to stay housed, leaving little for savings or emergencies. Families are doubling up, students are living in overcrowded conditions, and seniors are being pushed out of neighborhoods they've lived in for decades. Studies link rental instability to poorer health, disrupted education for children, and higher rates of anxiety and depression. What was once a temporary stage of life is becoming a permanent struggle for millions. In practice, the rental market breakdown spills into every corner of society. When people can't find affordable rentals, homelessness rises, emergency accommodation fills up, and communities fracture. Experts warn that without a significant increase in supply, pressure will keep intensifying. Practical steps renters are taking include securing longer leases when possible, documenting rental history carefully, and seeking local housing support early. Renting was meant to offer flexibility, but for many Australians, it has become the most unstable and frightening part of the housing system. If renting has become a struggle for you, share your story in the comments so others know they're not alone. Please subscribe to support our work. It's just one click, and it truly helps us continue.
Number 3. Cost of living collision. Right now, housing costs in Australia are colliding with rising prices everywhere else. Groceries, energy bills, insurance, and transport have all increased at the same time, leaving households with no room to adjust. Economic research shows that when multiple essential costs rise together, families don't slowly adapt, they hit a wall. Even people who own homes or have stable rentals are finding that once housing is paid, there's very little left for daily life. Behind the scenes, studies on household stress reveal how damaging this collision can be. People cut back on heating, skip meals, delay medical visits, and cancel basic protections like insurance just to stay afloat. Parents feel the pressure most, trying to shield children from the impact while absorbing the stress themselves. Researchers link prolonged cost of living pressure to declining mental health, relationship strain, and long-term financial fragility. The danger isn't one big bill, it's the constant drip of expenses that never seem to stop. Over time, the cost of living collision changes behavior in ways that are hard to reverse. Savings disappear, emergency funds vanish, and any unexpected expense becomes a crisis. Experts warn that once households lose financial resilience, even small shocks can push them into debt or housing loss. Practical advice now focuses on prioritization, tracking spending weekly, protecting housing costs first, and seeking assistance before stress becomes unmanageable. Housing doesn't exist in isolation. When living costs rise together, the entire system starts to crack. Is the cost of living squeezing you harder than ever? Share your experience in the comments and support our work by subscribing. It's just one click and truly helps.
Number 4. Population growth pressure. Rapidly, Australia's population growth is placing enormous strain on an already fragile housing system. Increased migration, returning residents, and natural population growth are all adding demand faster than new homes can be built. Housing and urban planning studies show that when population growth outpaces housing supply for multiple years, affordability collapses. Cities feel it first, but regional areas soon follow as people are pushed outward in search of anything they can afford. At the infrastructure level, research highlights a critical imbalance. Roads, schools, healthcare services, and public transit are struggling to keep up, making new housing developments slower and more expensive to deliver. Builders face higher costs, councils face planning bottlenecks, and communities resist rapid densification. This creates a vicious cycle. Fewer homes approved, higher competition for existing properties, and rising prices across both rental and ownership markets. Families find themselves competing not just with other locals, but with a growing population chasing limited space. Ultimately, population pressure amplifies every weakness in the housing system. When demand stays high and supply lags behind, even small economic shocks can trigger widespread displacement. Experts warn that without coordinated planning, housing shortages become permanent rather than temporary. Practical steps households are taking include expanding location flexibility, considering shared housing arrangements, and planning earlier than ever before. Population growth can strengthen a country, but without enough homes, it turns into a force that pushes ordinary Australians closer to the edge. Do you feel housing pressure increasing where you live? Share what you're seeing in the comments and help others understand the reality. Please subscribe to support our work. It's just one click and it makes a real difference. Number 5. Construction industry slowdown. Quietly, Australia's housing supply is being choked by a slowdown in the construction industry. Builder insolvencies, rising material costs, labor shortages, and tighter financing have stalled thousands of housing projects. Construction and housing studies show that when building slows during periods of high demand, shortages worsen rapidly. Homes that were planned years ago are delayed or canceled entirely, shrinking future supply at the worst possible moment. At the industry level, research reveals how fragile the system has become. Smaller builders are disappearing, subcontractors are stretched thin, and costs remain unpredictable. This instability forces developers to scale back projects or focus only on high-end builds, leaving fewer affordable homes for everyday Australians. Studies link prolonged construction slowdowns to long-term affordability crises, because once skilled workers and companies leave the sector, rebuilding capacity takes years, not months. In real life, this slowdown has direct consequences for families waiting to buy or rent. Delays mean fewer new listings, more competition, and rising prices for existing homes. Experts warn that without consistent building momentum, housing shortages become locked in. Practical advice now centers on realistic timelines, careful contract reviews, and avoiding overcommitment based on promised completion dates. Construction may feel distant from daily life, but when building stops, the entire housing system tightens, and ordinary Australians feel the squeeze first. Have delays or building issues affected your housing plans? Share your experience in the comments so others can learn from it. Please subscribe to support our work. It's just one click, and it helps us keep these stories coming. Number 6. Investor-driven housing imbalance. Increasingly, Australia's housing market is being shaped more by investors than by people looking for a place to live. Large investors and multiple property owners have greater access to capital, tax advantages, and borrowing power, allowing them to outbid first home buyers with ease. Housing market research shows that when investor activity dominates, prices rise faster than incomes, pushing owner-occupiers further out of reach. What was once a family home becomes a financial asset first. At market level, studies reveal how this imbalance distorts supply. Investors tend to focus on high-return areas, not long-term community needs. This concentrates demand in already pressured suburbs while neglecting affordable housing development. Rents rise as landlords pass on costs, and tenants face frequent turnover as properties are bought and sold. Research links high investor concentration to reduced housing stability, higher eviction rates, and lower homeownership among younger generations. In everyday life, the investor imbalance changes how people plan their future. First-time buyers delay milestones, families remain renters longer than intended, and seniors struggle to downsize into affordable options. Experts warn that without correcting this imbalance, housing becomes increasingly detached from real human need. Practical advice now includes understanding local investor activity, avoiding emotional bidding wars, and exploring alternative ownership models where possible. When homes are treated primarily as investments, the people who need them most are the ones left waiting. Do you feel investors have priced you out of housing? Share your experience in the comments and help others understand the reality. Please subscribe to support our work. It's just one click, and it truly helps us continue.
Number 7. Policy gaps and delays. Repeatedly, Australia's housing crisis has been met with policies that arrive too late or fall short of what's needed. While announcements promise relief, housing policy research shows that fragmented solutions rarely address root causes like supply shortages, affordability, and long-term planning. Measures are often temporary, targeted, or politically cautious, leaving structural problems untouched. As a result, households waiting for relief feel stuck in limbo while conditions continue to worsen. At government level, studies highlight how slow approval processes, inconsistent state-to-state rules, and planning bottlenecks delay new housing for years. Even well-funded programs struggle to translate into completed homes on the ground. This gap between policy intention and real-world delivery fuels frustration and distrust. Research shows that when people believe solutions exist only on paper, confidence collapses and private decision-making becomes more defensive, with families delaying moves or overextending financially out of fear. In practical terms, policy gaps leave households carrying the burden alone. Without clear, coordinated action, individuals must absorb rising costs and uncertainty themselves. Experts suggest staying informed about local policies, understanding eligibility early, and not relying solely on future promises when making housing decisions. Policy matters, but timing matters more. When solutions arrive after damage is done, recovery becomes far harder, and millions are left navigating a broken system on their own. Do you feel housing policies are helping or falling short where you live? Share your thoughts in the comments and support our work by subscribing. It's just one click and helps us keep these issues visible.
Number 8. Climate and insurance pressure. Increasingly, climate-related risks are reshaping Australia's housing landscape in ways many homeowners never planned for. Scientific research confirms that floods, bushfires, heat waves, and coastal erosion are becoming more frequent and intense. These events don't just damage homes physically, they quietly erode affordability through soaring insurance premiums and declining property confidence. In many regions, owning a home now comes with hidden climate costs that grow every year. Across the insurance sector, data shows premiums rising sharply or coverage being reduced altogether in high-risk zones. Some insurers are withdrawing entirely from flood or fire-prone areas, leaving homeowners with limited or unaffordable options. When insurance becomes impossible to secure, banks may refuse loans or refinancing, trapping families in properties they can't sell and can't fully protect. Research links this insurance squeeze directly to falling property values, even in communities that have not yet experienced a major disaster. For everyday households, the impact is deeply practical. Higher insurance costs eat into already stretched budgets, while uncertainty about future risks creates stress and hesitation. Experts advise homeowners to reassess risk exposure, invest in resilience upgrades where possible, and understand how climate ratings affect long-term value. Climate change is no longer a distant issue. It is actively shaping who can afford to stay in their homes. Without systemic adaptation and smarter planning, millions may find their homes becoming financially unlivable long before they are physically uninhabitable. Is climate risk already affecting housing costs where you live? Tell us your experience in the comments and subscribe to support the deep research behind these videos. It's just one click.
Number 9. Investor retreat and market volatility. Suddenly, large property investors are pulling back from parts of Australia's housing market, and the ripple effects are being felt by everyday homeowners. Economic research shows that rising interest rates, tighter lending rules, and new rental regulations are reducing investor confidence. When investors retreat, liquidity dries up, meaning fewer buyers, slower sales, and sharper price swings that destabilize entire neighborhoods. Historically, investors have played a major role in keeping housing markets active, especially in urban and rental-heavy areas. But data now shows a shift towards safer assets as property risks rise. This withdrawal increases volatility. Prices can fall quickly in some suburbs, while rents spike in others due to reduced supply. Studies link this imbalance to greater housing insecurity, particularly for families already struggling with affordability and unstable rental conditions. For homeowners and renters alike, the consequences are serious. Falling property values can trap owners in negative equity, while renters face fewer choices and higher costs as landlords exit the market. Experts warn that without balanced policy and long-term stability, investor retreat could amplify housing cycles rather than smooth them. Understanding this trend helps households prepare, whether by strengthening financial buffers or reassessing housing plans before volatility deepens.
Do you see investors leaving your area already? Share your thoughts below and subscribe to support our research-driven videos. It's just one click. Number 10. Systemic policy mismatch. Finally, one of the most overlooked reasons Australia's housing system is breaking is a growing mismatch between policy intentions and real-world outcomes. Governments introduce reforms to improve affordability, protect renters, or cool prices, but research shows these policies often work in isolation rather than as a coordinated system. When supply policy, taxation, migration planning, and lending rules are misaligned, pressure builds silently until the system begins to crack. Meanwhile, studies in urban economics highlight that housing is not just a market, it is an ecosystem. For example, demand-side incentives, like first home buyer grants, can push prices up if supply is restricted. At the same time, zoning delays and infrastructure bottlenecks limit new construction, even when population growth accelerates. This creates a feedback loop where prices rise faster than incomes, pushing more households into financial stress despite supportive policies. Ultimately, the danger lies in delayed consequences. Policy mistakes don't always show immediate damage, but over time they compound. Researchers warn that when governments react too slowly or change rules too frequently, confidence erodes for builders, buyers, and renters alike. This uncertainty reduces long-term investment in affordable housing and increases the risk of widespread displacement. Without coordinated, evidence-based reform, millions of Australians could face housing instability not because of one bad decision, but because the system itself stopped working together. Which policy do you think is hurting housing the most? Drop your perspective in the comments and subscribe to support our in-depth work. It's just one click.
Australia's housing crisis is no longer a distant warning or a problem for a select few. What we've explored in this video shows a system under pressure from multiple directions at once: rising costs, policy gaps, population growth, and financial strain all colliding at the same time. When these forces combine, the result isn't just higher prices or tighter rentals, but a deep sense of insecurity for millions of ordinary people who believed housing was their safest foundation. What makes this moment especially dangerous is how quietly it's unfolding. Many households are still coping, still paying, still hoping conditions will improve, but research into housing stress shows that collapse rarely comes with a single dramatic trigger. Instead, it arrives gradually. Missed payments, shrinking savings, forced compromises, and finally, displacement. By the time the damage becomes visible, recovery is far more difficult and far more expensive for families and governments alike. This crisis also challenges a long-held belief that hard work alone guarantees stability. Even dual-income households, long-term renters, and recent buyers are now exposed to risks that didn't exist a decade ago. The data makes one thing clear: housing stress is no longer tied only to personal choices, but to structural issues that affect everyone, regardless of age or background. Yet awareness is power. Understanding how and why the system is breaking gives people the chance to prepare, adapt, and demand better solutions. Conversations like this matter because silence benefits a broken system. When people talk, question, and stay informed, pressure builds for smarter, fairer housing decisions that prioritize long-term stability over short-term fixes. Australia's housing future is being shaped right now. Whether it becomes more secure or more fragile depends on what happens next and who is paying attention. If this topic hit close to home, share your thoughts in the comments. Real stories matter more than headlines. We've explored related housing risks in a previous video, and it connects directly to what you've just watched. These videos take serious research and effort, so if you want to support our work, please subscribe. It's just one click.